All right. Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for taking some time to join us today in this informational session on the upcoming public safety referendum for Germantown. My name is Steve Krecklow, and I'm the village administrator here. We'll be presenting an overview of some of the key information on, this critical topic of ensuring that we're able to provide critical public safety services to Germantown residents. Just a couple of notes on the logistics of the meeting. We have a brief presentation that we'll be running through. I'm going to cover a couple of topics, and then both the chiefs will be talking as well. We will have some time available at the end of the presentation for questions, so I'd ask everyone to hold your questions until the end. We also, I believe, have some folks who are joining us online. This is being offered as a virtual meeting as well. And for those of you who are online, there will also be an opportunity at the end of the meeting for you to ask questions that may occur as we go through the presentation. So I'll start out with a little bit of background. It's my little technical difficulty here. The slide's not advancing for me. Oh, sorry. Well, this is why they had me go first before the two chiefs, that in case there were any technical difficulties, that I would work through them here. Yeah. It's advancing the notes, but not the slides. Not sure. Otherwise, we can go from this view and we can speak off of that. All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate everyone's patience here, just helping us work through that. As many of you know firsthand, and those of you who've been in Germantown for a while, this community has seen significant growth over the past few years and decades. And as it's grown, we've identified that there is a need for some significant increases in both the police and fire departments. Despite careful stewardship of village finances by the village board, we've found that through our normal budgeting processes, we're just not able to add enough officers and firefighters to keep pace with the demand for services. So as a result, we've come forward with a public safety referendum asking for some additional resources from the Germantown community. So next, I'm going to introduce our two chiefs here who are going to handle the bulk of the presentation. We have Chief Mike Snow from the police department and Chief John Delane from the fire department. Before they start speaking, I just want to recognize the efforts that these two gentlemen, as well as all the men and women of the police and fire department, have made to keep Germantown safe, to respond to emergency situations, sometimes working working very long hours in very difficult conditions to try to keep up with the pace of demand for services, and always working diligently to find new and creative ways to respond to the challenges that the departments face. But with that, I'll start out with Chief Delane to talk a little bit more specifically about the fire department. Did the same thing. Oh, now we're having the same issue here with the PowerPoint. Did we skip one? Oh, take it from there.
All right. Thank you. Over time, the number of people able to work with the fire department on a paid-on-call basis has decreased faster than we have added part-time or full-time staff. Between 2016 and 2023, Germantown Fire Department saw nearly a 30% reduction in the number of our paid-on-call staffing. This chart really draws attention to another critical component: increasing calls for service. Between 2016 and 2023, calls to the department increased by 41%. In 2023 alone, we were called to respond to 2,452 incidents. Nearly 20% of Germantown Fire Department calls for services in 2023 occurred simultaneously. With just 5 people on duty per shift, there are not enough staff to adequately respond to multiple emergencies. So currently, we have 5 people on shift, which is enough to staff 2 ambulances and a battalion chief. At some points in time, due to vacations, we may drop down to 4 people on shift. What that is just enough to cover 2 ambulance calls of a normal routine. If we do get significant medical calls, for example, maybe a cardiac arrest, that takes both of our ambulances to handle that call at one time, leaving no other calls left, or no other ambulances left in the village to handle the remainder of the calls. In addition to that, per the standards for firefighting, for every 2 people you have on the inside of a burning building, you must have on the outside of a burning building. You take into account 1 person needs to direct the fire scene, 1 person needs to operate the fire truck or the pump on the fire truck. That leaves 2 people, maybe 3 people left on the outside of the building, which is not enough personnel to even enter a burning building at that point in time until people come from either outside agencies or come from home from the fire department. When multiple calls for service occur at once, the department must rely on paid-on-call staff to leave their homes or day jobs and help provide a response. In addition to people who may respond from home, if we do not get enough people from home, we also rely on our outside agencies, neighboring communities, for mutual aid. And sometimes those neighboring agencies are not available. If the referendum is approved, the fire department will have 7 to 8 personnel on duty per shift, enabling 4-member crews and fire apparatus to immediately depart the station and enter a burning structure, rather than having to wait for the arrival of paid-on-call staff or rely on neighboring departments for support. Relying on neighboring departments for support happens quite frequently. And like I said before, they're not always available, especially in the event if a neighboring department has a fire at that time, that actually draws the resources from probably the majority of the departments around us. So we are left reaching further and further away for help. Additional staff per shift will also mean GFD can dispatch up to 3 ambulances at once, meeting the growing needs in Germantown to provide care simultaneously. That's all I have right now.
Chief Snow?
I wanted to thank everybody for coming out today. I'm Chief Snow with the police department. And I'll talk a little bit about the police department and why we feel we need the additional staff by us. We do, like the fire department, we provide 24/7 hour service to the community. As of now, we have 38 sworn officers. So what that means for us, when you talk about minimum staffing levels, we require that we have 3 officers and a supervisor working each shift. And the thing that I want everyone to understand about that is those levels haven't changed since like the 90s. Much about the village has changed, but those staffing numbers haven't. So where we may not see the dramatic increase in numbers over the last 5 years, like the fire department points to, we haven't increased our staffing since the 90s. So we're doing it with the same amount of people that we did 30 years ago. And that's where we are really seeing that need for the additional officers. As John pointed out, there's been an increased demand on fire and officers in the community due largely to the growth. Also the nature of the calls that we're seeing. So we have seen a significant increase in retail thefts, property crime, general thefts, whereas 30 years ago, our officers could respond to those calls with 1 officer. The nature of those calls has required that almost all calls are requiring a 2-officer response. We're going to more calls where there's firearms involved, more calls that are involved ending up in a high-speed pursuit, just more high risk in nature than we've seen in years past. We're seeing many more calls for residents that are in need or that are experiencing some type of mental health crisis. And to get those services that those people need requires a lot of resources on our part as well. And when we do, try to find those resources, that requires our officers staying with that person. Oftentimes throughout the shift, they could go into another shift as well. Those calls can last anywhere from 4 to over 24 hours of commitment from our officers. And those numbers continue to increase. Just like you've heard nationwide, mental health is a crisis in this nation, and it's certainly no different in Germantown. When compared to nearby communities, Germantown Police Department staff is below its peers in ability to provide service to the entire community, even with 4 additional officers to help provide a police presence throughout all the Germantown GP staffing levels will be modest. And you can see where we rank in officers per square mile. And that's an interesting statistic that's not always addressed, but it just brings to everyone's attention that Germantown isn't 3 or 4 square miles like people might think of it. It's in excess of 34 square miles. We have to provide coverage for all that. So responding from one end of the village to the other end of the village takes time. If officers are tied up in the southeast, a lot of times we're relying on mutual aid, just as John talked about with the fire department, to assist us in other areas of the village. And sometimes those departments just do not have those resources available either. So what the 4 additional officers does for us is allows us to increase those minimum staffing levels. 4 officers would be required to increase our staffing for just 1 officer on days, an additional officer on days, and an additional officer on second shift. We can't just do that with 1 or 2 people. You can imagine that, they're on a rotation. People have time off. We're dealing with vacation time, sick leave, FMLA. Any number of issues that we'd have to backfill those positions. So we can't do it just 1 or 2 officers. I would need to add 2 officers to each shift to increase that minimum staffing by 1 officer. So that's where we came to the need for 4 additional officers. Again, that lets us try to get back to that place where we're doing more proactive things. Traffic concerns are still a huge priority in this village with our residents. We're not able to just proactively run different traffic assignments anymore just because our officers are really tied up on other incidents. We used to have a traffic car years and years ago, which eventually just got absorbed into just that traffic car being part of the patrol. We just didn't have the resources to have them be specifically traffic, and we'd like to get back to doing some of those things. Thank you.
All right, and next I'll talk a little bit about the finances related to the referendum and why we're actually putting this on the ballot. As you may or may not be aware, village revenue, property tax revenue in particular, is limited by state statute. There's levy limits in place that place limits on how much we're able to increase funding for things like police and fire each year. Now, throughout the last several budget processes, the village board and the police chief and fire chief and other village staff have worked diligently to try to redirect resources in order to fund more police and fire positions. And we have been able to do that to some extent. In this year's budget, by making reductions in other areas of the village budget, we were able to fund 4 police officers and 2 firefighters. But that isn't enough to meet the overall needs. We've also looked at things like improving efficiency within all village departments, including police and fire. And as a result, we're in the process of consolidating our public safety dispatch function with Washington County. We will achieve a savings from that consolidation. But again, doesn't reach the levels that are needed to achieve the staffing levels that we need in the police and fire departments. We've also looked diligently for external funding sources. Both the police and fire departments have applied for external grants on a regular basis. And while there have been some smaller grants that have funded specific things like pieces of equipment that the fire department uses, cameras that have been installed in some high crime areas that the police department relies on, we've not been able to achieve acceptance of some of the other larger grant applications for programs like the COPS program through the Department of Justice, or the SAFER program, which is run through FEMA to provide additional staffing resources. In fact, we haven't received any grants of that nature in the village since 1987, although we've applied on a regular basis. So that really means that the options are limited here. And that's why we are coming before referendum to the voters to ask for additional resources to staff our public safety function as we really believe it should be staffed. So on April 2nd this year, when you go to the ballot box, you will see the following referendum question on the ballot. One important thing to remember is because there are several referendum questions on this year's ballot, this is going to appear on the backside. So when you're at the polling location and you get your ballot, be sure to take a look at the back of the ballot for this referendum question and then submit your response. So I can summarize a little bit here about what happens if you vote yes, if a majority votes yes, and what happens if a majority votes no. If the majority of Germantown residents vote yes, we'll have the resources that are available to add 10 additional firefighter paramedics and 4 additional police officers. And that is the level that our chiefs are saying is adequate to ensure public safety and to ensure that we're on a sustainable basis and able to respond to the number of calls that we're getting. If the majority of people vote no, we're going to be in a difficult situation. We anticipate that the calls for service are going to continue to grow. We don't see that going down anytime in the future. And while the village board and village staff will make every effort to try to respond to those increased calls for public safety, there will be limits, and we'll be limited by the staff that we have available at this time. So here's a little bit more about the dollar impacts of the referendum if it passes. What we're asking for to fund those 14 additional public safety positions is a total of about $1.4 million in the property tax levy. So what this means for individual residents and property owners is if you have an average home of which in Germantown is assessed at $350,000, you would see an annual increase on your property tax bill of $178. That translates into about $3.43 per week. For those of you who don't have the average house, you can use that $100,000 number as a multiplier. So for every $100,000 of home value, you would see a $51 increase in your property tax bill, or about $1 a week. So if you own a $400,000 house, multiply that 51 times 4. If you own a $500,000 house, multiply that 51 times 5 to calculate the impact on your personal property tax bill. So again, the election day is April 2nd. And this is an item that will be on the agenda, on the ballot. Remember that if you're coming to vote, Wisconsin voters are required to show an ID when you come in, and our poll workers will be checking that. There are also actually two other ways in addition to voting on April 2nd that you're able to vote. You can request a absentee ballot through the state website and complete that and submit that by mail to the Village of Germantown. Or we do have in-person absentee voting in the weeks before April 2nd, where you can come in, show your ID, request an absentee ballot, fill it out, and leave it with our election staff to be counted on April 2nd election day. All of the information regarding polling locations, hours for in-person absentee ballot is also on the Germantown Village website. So with that, we'll wrap up our presentation and open it up for questions. You're welcome to step forward to the microphone. We'll take our people who are on site here first. I'm going to ask you to come up to the microphone and just give your name and your address. And after we have any questions from our in-person audience, then we'll see if anybody online has any questions. So feel free to step on up.
Good afternoon, Bob Soderberg, W144N9723, Elmwood Drive, Germantown. Both chiefs, thank you so much for all you do. I'm a recently retired school board president, and you guys have been a wonderful partner of ours in the 12 years that I was on the school board. I'm here to show my support for this referendum. I really don't have any questions, but you guys do a wonderful job with the crime increasing in our state, in our county, and in adjoining counties. I applaud your officers. You need more officers rather than the 4 that you're going for. The speed over, or the bad actors that are coming in from Milwaukee County and causing havoc in our community, we need to stop that. We need to catch the bad guys and lock them up, and you guys are doing a wonderful job. In October of this year, we had an active shooter incident at the Kennedy Middle School. Your officers did a wonderful job in responding. Likewise, yours, Chief, your prior officers. Again, I'm here to show support, and if there's anything that I can do to increase the awareness in our community of the drastic need for this, please let me know. Again, thank you.
Thank you. And next person, please step up.
My name is Jeff Johnson, W160N10587, Fieldstone Pass. And I have several questions, but the main one I'll address to both chiefs. Adding these additional staff positions, 10 on the fire department, 4 on the police department, are there adequate resources to support those officers or firefighters at this point? Or will it involve a need for more funding for support of the firefighters? For example, Chief, do you have 3 ambulances if you have the people to staff them? And for the police chief, there's been talk over several years about a new police station. If you add more officers, do you need more space, or are you able to work within the confines of your existing facilities and equipment?
As far as the fire department goes, we do have the equipment at the fire department to support those personnel. The fire station will be very tight. We will be converting some of our offices to combined offices and bunk rooms. So we do have places to house those employees. But as far as the actual equipment for them to utilize, we have plenty.
Uh, Thank you. Great question. And our primary need is going to come from a space issue. And that's not something that's due necessarily to this. We've been going back and forth on a new police building since, again, going back to the 90s. So we are running out of space. Locker room, our evidence room needs a lot of updates on it. So for a number of different reasons, we will be looking, still moving toward a new police department. And yeah, with the additional personnel, that's going to certainly make that a bigger issue. Can we absorb what we have right now with the station we have? Absolutely, we would find a way to make that work. But at some point, we are definitely going to need to look at a different facility.
I guess I would just add that, first of all, I think that was a great question. We do have funding in this year's budget to fund a needs assessment for a new public safety building. And after the results of the referendum, so we know exactly what we're building that for. That's something that we'll go forward with. And it is, as Chief Snow mentioned, the police side of that is something we've included in our 5-year capital plan to begin work. I guess either way, we do need a new police building, and that is something we'd be working towards in the next few years.
If I could ask a follow-up question then. And this is directed to both of you. The cost that we're looking at as part of the referendum, the roughly $1.4 million, is that simply the cost of the personnel? Are you acquiring personnel who are already trained, or do you have to go out and hire people and train them in these positions? Are there other costs involved beyond just the additional cost to your payroll of adding these positions?
For us, that's an unknown. We started a lateral transfer program, and we have tried to utilize that to attract experienced officers. There's only so many that are available. So if we have to hire an officer that is not trained, has no experience, we would have to send them to the academy first. That academy runs about 5.5 months. When they got done with that, then they would go through our field training process. Regardless, they'd go through the field training process anyway. The difference, though, is for that experienced officer that can get going on the road more quickly, we're hiring them at a much higher rate. The newer officers, starting per their contract, get that introductory officer salary. That's step one.
For the fire department, we typically take in people who are already certified. Our minimum qualification is firefighter 1 and paramedic. They come into us that way already. If we were to take people who did not have that certification level, the paramedic certification class is a minimum of 1 year, and the Fire 1 certification class is a minimum of 1 college semester. So there is nothing actually in our contracts or in our policies that allows us to hire anybody full-time who is not already certified in those 2 positions.
And I should point out as well, when we're sending someone to the police academy, the state does pay for that. So that 5.5 months that they're in that basic training, the state does cover that cost of that.
It's also the same with firefighter level 1. The state does cover that cost. The state actually reimburses us for EMT basic, which they have to be certified in before they become certified as a paramedic.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. I do want to say I appreciate the hard work both departments do in the community and keeping us safe. Like the previous gentleman, I'm not necessarily wholeheartedly sold on the need for the referendum, the additional money. But I'm certainly willing to consider the facts and see what needs to be done. I think it's, I would encourage people to gather information and think through the facts rather than just say more public safety. That's a great thing. It obviously is a good thing, but we do need to balance what we want versus what we can afford. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on. Appreciate it.
I believe that covers all of the questions from the in-person audience here. Is there anyone online who has a question they'd like to ask? If you are online, if you just speak up, if your microphone is not on mute. Or there's no one online with any questions. So with that, that concludes our information session here this afternoon. I would point out that there is additional information available on our website at germantownwi.gov, public safety referendum. So for folks and I would agree wholeheartedly with Mr. Johnson that, please take a look at all of the information. And if you do have any other additional questions, we do have a special email box that is set up where you can submit those questions and we will respond to them as quickly as possible. That email box is referendum@germantownwi.gov. So again, appreciate everyone turning out. And we will be having one more of these public information sessions on March 13th at 6 o'clock in the evening. So thank you very much. And please feel free to submit any other questions you have.
Thank you. Thank you.